Welcome to Midweek Meditation. So soulful spiritual retreat, as Lori sometimes calls it. We'll find some other names for it too. I want to acknowledge I'm in Redwood City. Everybody can hear me, right? I think we got all of the mics working again. Yay! And I want to acknowledge that I'm on ancestral Ramaytush Ohlone land here in California. And the Lambton tribelet was living in Redwood City. Today we're going to do a meditation on the breath, coming back to that basic, simple, always with us breath. And I was very inspired by, I really like the Torah portions in Genesis and Exodus. When we get to Leviticus, I probably won't be referring to the Torah portion as much, but this is my weekly Torah too. So this is my place to kind of explore it. So today is Jacob in his wrestling match, where he finds himself yet again in the desert at night alone. And this time, instead of like last week, we talked about he had a dream where he saw angels going back and forth to heaven. This time he encounters a stranger, which there's a lot of interpretations. It's left a little fuzzy, although the Hebrew is ish, man. It's not clear that it is a simple man. And so simple as in another human being. And so we have a lot of ways to interpret it. So there is, he's returning back to his homeland. He's running away yet again, now from his father-in-law, very troubled patriarch. After 20 years, he hasn't seen his brother who he stole his birthright from. That's one way to look at it, that, he pretended to be his slightly older twin, got his blessing from his father. And now he's going back and with his wives and their handmaiden servants, whatever you want to call them, and his gaggle of children and everything that he's acquired over the years. And maybe a little scheming in there too. But he's going back to see his brother. He sends out a scout, tell my brother I'm coming, and the scout comes back and says, your brother's coming with 400 men. So Jacob gets very somethinged, and that something is yirah. And I know that we've talked about that here before. Yirah is translated both fear and awe. So it can get translated that he's afraid, or it could also be translated that he's in awe that his brother is coming and this is all going to happen. And another way to look at it is the wrestling that he does is he's actually wrestling with his own internal demons, his own guilt and fear about having stolen his brother's birthright, pretending to be his brother for his father, who was blind and couldn't fully tell. Breaks up his camp so that if they're attacked by his twin, not everything will get attacked, sends his family away, and so he's alone. And then this wrestling happens with this mysterious Ish man, and he wrestles all night long. And as the dawn is coming up, he's persevering. He's not giving up. He gets wounded by this Ish, but he still wrestles. And as the dawn is coming up, this is what makes it kind of strange. This Ish, this man, says, you have to let me go. The sun is coming up. So there's some sense that it could have been an angel, a messenger of God. It gets translated that way. Some sense that it could have been God in some embodied way, any and all of the above. And he says, no, I won't let you go until you bless me. So now kind of coming back to I want a blessing that's for me, not a blessing that was supposed to be for my brother. You can see the connection there if you want. He doesn't say that. And the blessing that he gets is probably not what he was asking for, but he's blessed. The Ish says, well, I'm going to give you a new name. You were Yaakov, now you're going to be Yisrael, because you have struggled with man and the divine, and you have persevered. You've prevailed. And that's the blessing that he gives him. He has this name, which then becomes, um, the name of, we are called B'nai Yisrael, children of this patriarch, Jews, and everybody who came from that lineage. And so we have taken on this sense of, we struggle, we wrestle that this is actually our birthright. He obviously feels that he has seen God because he names the place where he is Pnei El, the face of God, not just Bethel, which is what he named a place last week, which is the house of God, but the face of God right here. And then he proceeds to be called by both names until he passes. He gets called Yisrael and he gets called Yaakov. So he's kind of both. He's this person that has, where he was and where he's going happening at the same time. And as I said, he gets injured by this stranger and he limps, supposedly for the rest of his life. It is a lifelong vulnerability, and yet he struggled and came out of this and got his blessing. So there's a sense of Jacob who struggled, wrestled, was injured, even vulnerable, and yet persevered. And that's kind of the energy that I'm looking at this through today, and then wanting to bring that into our meditation. So perseverance is a great quality to think about in a meditation practice, because many times we sit down and we think we're going to get something out of the meditation, and we don't. We are distracted. It doesn't give us what we want. And it's not just meditation, but it can be this way in other practices and in life. And perseverance, as a quality, tells us, stick with it. What's happening now is part of a chain, and it's maybe even a chain that you won't even see the end of that chain. You may not see the finish point, but you're part of something, and to keep doing it and to persevere. I know that I may have mentioned this before. Roshi Joan Halifax, one of the American Buddhist wisdom teachers, she talks about wise hope, and she's talked about that for a while. I heard her a few years ago speak at Stanford. This sense of, especially the troubling times that we find ourselves in, if we get fixed on the end point, the finish point, the results, we really lose hope, and we become demoralized, and we can become burned out. But if we recognize that the perseverance and the hope for something that will happen, and maybe not even in our lifetime, is what we're working with, that gives us more energy and more resilience. And these times that we find ourselves in now, where, it seems like in some ways we're back to square one with COVID, that the rates of infection are higher than they have ever been in the United States. And we just don't seem to have things, we don't have things under control. And it's happening around the world in many places, not in all places, because there are some countries that did some pretty extensive lockdown. But in places where it's not heavy duty lockdown, we're seeing surges everywhere. And we're going into this winter, which they had actually told us back, 6 months ago, the winter time is going to be another surge. This always happens when you have, viruses and epidemics, is because we're indoors more. And that's what happens. So how to persevere through this and know that there will be light at the end of the tunnel at some point. We do have the hope of these vaccines, which they're, starting to put in place of how they're going, who's going to get the first ones and how it's going to be implemented and what they need to do. But it's a long process still, for most of us, we're months and months away from, when we would get a vaccine and be able to then bring back some parts of our life that we've been missing for a while. So perseverance, really important. I also looked, Sharon Salzberg has a book that came out a couple years ago called The Kindness Handbook. It's very sweet. And I like metta, which is, she's big. I think she was the first American Buddhist teacher to bring metta, loving kindness practice to the Western world. And she is the teacher of my mentor. Sharon was the teacher of, and still is the teacher of Sylvia Boorstein. I just haven't read anything. And one of my clients was saying something about this was a really nice book. So I picked it up, and it's got these short little chapters which are really, nice to read about, and different aspects of kindness, loving kindness meditation. And she has this little short chapter on motivation, and she talks about when we're attached to certain results or certain timing, that leads us away from perseverance, and we get dispirited. And that the Buddhist teaching is that the immediate results and the immediately, how it's perceived is only a small part of right action, and that trying something with wholeheartedness is a much larger portion than whether you get to the point that you think that you want to when you take the action, and being willing to fail. All of these things are much more important than whether you actually, hit the nail on the head, so to speak, whether you get the results that you want as you sit in your meditation. And it reminds me, I'll bring it full circle back to Judaism. It reminds me of something that I know that I've shared here, about how Judaism looks at keva versus kavanah. So keva is fixed, that the Hebrew term for fixed. And when we look at, and kavanah is intention. I use that word pretty frequently. And there is a discussion about the Rambam and a few other people, important teachers who I can't remember right now, have all talked about, well, what's more important, keva or kavanah when you pray? And I thought I wrote it down, but I guess I didn't. I think it was the Rambam who said that actually, if you don't have kavanah, if you don't have intention, don't consider it prayer. If you show up at a prayer service, or you open your siddur, you decide, I'm going to pray because I'm supposed to, but you have no intention, it really wasn't prayer. So his orientation is that it's more important your intention than whether you get to any place. And I know that that's my intention. It's not what we do, but that we intend to do it. It's not to say that our actions aren't important, but if we don't hit the mark, if we don't get the results we want, our intention is much more important, both for ourselves and for others. So if we are, I think it was Sharon that gave the example, like if you decide to give away possessions and you do it because you feel like, oh, I don't deserve these, I'm going to give them away to other people. And from the outside, it looks to them, oh, they're being so generous, they're giving away their possessions. From a spiritual perspective, that's not right action. That's not good action. It needs to come from a place of, I'm giving this away as a gift because somebody else needs them, not because I'm not good enough to have them. Or if you do something out of anger, that's not a good action. That's not a right action, even though the action might lead to somebody. Or if you give away a lot of money, So to inflate your ego versus you give away a lot of money because there are people who have less and they need it. We all know these kinds of distinctions. And the last thing that I wanted to say was Pirkei Avot, which is the teaching or the wisdom of the fathers. It takes these little pithy pieces from the Talmud and shares them. So in Pirkei Avot, I think it's Rabbi Tarfon who says, "It is not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it." So I'd like us to take that orientation, that Kavanah, into, look, if we don't meditate as much as we want to, it's okay. When we are meditating, have some intention to be kind to yourself. I'm doing it today. If we're distracted, but our intention was to soften our heart, to connect, whatever it is that our intention was, if it has this purish quality to it of something good, it doesn't matter. If, don't be attached to the outcome. Let your heart and your intention be the majority of what it is that feeds your soul, and not whether you went to some, high ecstatic place or you got stuck in your thoughts. So I'm going to invite you, when we get to the meditation, to set some clear intention for yourself. What's my intention in this sit today for these next 20 minutes or so? And let it be something that, feels like it's coming from your heart, and not, I want to get to a certain place, but I want to focus on my intention. I know Sarah, who is part of our community here, Kahila in Hebrew. I know if you go to Buddhist meditation centers, they use the term Sangha. It's the same. So Sarah's traveling today, as she was last week, and she asked us to bring her in with our intention. So we're bringing in Sarah. And I was, because we're doing a breath meditation, I'm going to do a little chant, very simple chant about breathing. And so it's called Breathe It In by a group called Beautiful Chorus. And that'll help us set our intention that we're just here with the breath. And then I'll move into a very simple breath meditation. And we'll come back and finish up with a reading if there's time. So breathe it in, breathe it out, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out. Breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out. Breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out. Breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out. Breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out. So I invite you to set an intention for yourself for this time of practice together. Something loving and kind and compassionate. And it may simply to be as present as possible here today. And as we start our meditation, noticing the pressure of the body on the chair. Noticing anywhere the body is touching itself or folded in on itself. Maybe your hands are together, one hand touching the other. At the elbows, the crease behind the knees. Maybe you're crossing your ankles. And sending our focus to the breath, noticing the breath in the body, noticing your inhale and noticing your exhale. Noticing the inhale, maybe being cool around the nostrils or the lips as the air comes into your body. And as you breathe out, noticing the air that is warmed from your life force. Noticing the air on your skin, maybe of your cheeks or your hands. Noticing as the breath comes into the body, how your body is receiving it this day, this moment. And as you let it go, noticing how your body releases and lets it go. As you breathe in, noticing the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, noticing the lungs contracting or just softening and letting go. Breathing in, noticing all the directions that the air fills up the body, front to back, side to side, up and down. And as you exhale, noticing the contraction and the folding in, front to back, side to side, up and down. Breathing in your own natural breath rhythm. Maybe deepening the inhale just a little bit and noticing that pause before you let it go and exhale. A couple more breaths where we inhale. Notice the pause. Don't hold it extra. Just notice it and exhaling and letting go. One more. Feeling the rhythm of the in, the momentary pause between the in and an out, and then the exhale, breathing out. And letting your breath cycle be natural for you. Just noticing, does it feel full or a little short? Whatever it is, accepting it for today. And as we use the breath to help us relax the mind and be present, we imagine each breath in and each breath out, a little bit more quietness in the mind, letting go. Maybe with the exhale, the thoughts seeming to drift away on a cloud. Inhale, maybe a little bit more attention on the breath. Exhale, maybe a little bit more softening in the body. Whatever feels right for you. And whatever your intention was for this time, holding that lightly as we simply focus on the breath. Breathing in, what are we feeling and experiencing? Breathing out, what are we noticing and curious about? And as the mind drifts away to thinking and gets caught up in a whole series of thoughts, when we notice it, we simply come back to the breath. You may want to say to yourself, breathing in, I am breathing in, and breathing out, I'm breathing out. Not necessary, but it's an option. Or simply returning to the feeling of the breath moving in the body and the breath being released. So we'll take the next few minutes to be with the breath as our focus to let go and relax the mind and whatever it is that was your intention for today. So I wanted to read you something again from Rabbi Cheryl Lewart's blessing book on perseverance. Her blessing for perseverance is, may perseverance shine in you like an eternal light in the wilderness that keeps you going, a beacon of encouragement no matter how dark the night landscape of your soul. May you endure past the weariness that invades your spirit and persists until you find refuge and a safe haven. May you tend this light, nurturing and caring for it, understanding that this persistent light within you comes from an inner divine spark that will always light your way. Amen. And so for those of you that are leaving us on the stream or watching this on the recording, we hope that you know and see that the divine light in you is seen and that you can feel it and see it. And we are all made in the image of that divine light. And so we say, in the image of Yah, B'Tselem Yah,